what? I got 3 months in before I completely blew my book buying budget. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's video is the September reading wrap-up / book buying budget update, which I failed at miserably for the month of September. Before we jump into the video, make sure you check the description box down below for links to my social media and Discord, should you want to come along for the ride. Now, I only have one book to show you physically from what I purchased in the month of September. I bought 2 other books. So I bought 3 books and I spent $275. $275. I bought the folio edition of Jaws, which I've wanted for a while. You can't see it in the shop. There's a whole bunch of sharks on the top of that shelf, and I've wanted it since I've seen it. While they are beautiful, I don't feel the need to own a whole bunch of Folio Society editions. But the Jaws one, I've just looked at it on and off for like 2 years, and I bit the bullet. I saved up for like a month, and it's now on its way here. That was $145. I pre-ordered the 3rd book of the China Medievals that Broken Binding is doing, because that came up. That was $100. So that's already about $245. And then I went and did some secondhand book shopping with a friend of mine who's just moved to Perth, and I found this collection of H.G. Wells books. It's an omnibus edition. It's pretty good nick. It cost me $25 to get all of these, and I know that Ryan may want to read some of these with me because also interested in H.G. Wells. So, it was a steal for $25. So I picked that one up as well as the omnibus. So I failed. I don't even know if I'm on track anymore because of last month just blew it. So here is hoping for a relatively quiet October to get back on track. I think if I don't spend anything this month, I've just decided that I'm not going to keep buying the Samantha Shannon series from the Broken Binding, and once I read the 2 I have, the Bone Season and the Mime Order, I'll probably donate them or sell them or whatever. Yeah, it's just another, I think it's £70, and then the shipping on top of that. I just can't justify it for an author that I've not read yet, even though I just bought China Medieval. Don't ask me how logic works in this situation. If I like the books, I'll buy the rest of them in the normal paperbacks, which will match the other paperbacks I have for Samantha Shannon. Anyway, I digress. This video is a reading wrap-up. So in the month of September, I read a total of 8 books, and I was so close to finishing Toll the Hounds. My friends, I just didn't do it. In the month of September. But it is October 5th, and I've now finished it. So in the month of October's reading wrap-up, I will have finally fucking finished Toll the Hounds by Stephen Erickson. Let's jump into what I read this month. The first thing that I read was Mythos Unbound by Shayla Morganson. I'll pop it up here. This was in preparation for a talk with the author here on the channel, which I'll have linked down below if you are interested, and also to back the Kickstarter. So, sorry, I did back the Kickstarter, but that wasn't my money. That was Rachel's and my money. I'm not counting that, because that was another $45 for the Kickstarter. I'm deciding to bleep that from my memory and my own budget, since technically we bought it together. This is an urban fantasy which reads like a television show. So if you are someone who really likes sort of action-heavy, sort of like procedurals in Monster of the Week vibes, you're going to have a pretty good time with this one. This one is following Evie, who has just joined the FBI and is part of like the homicide team, I think. And also, I would argue her brother, so the 2 main characters, it's a sibling dynamic, who hunts supernatural beings, and Evie doesn't believe in that. So that was a really cool dynamic. So things that go bump in the night. Evie gets this case where she thinks that the monster that she's hunting is a serial killer, and the brother doesn't believe that that's the case. He sort of thinks it's one of the monsters that he hunts, but he can't share that journey with anyone. This was a lot of fun, very quick and easy to read, and has that real sort of TV vibe, like Supernatural cross X-Files, cross Dexter, cross Grimm vibe. So if you like any of those TV shows, you're probably going to have a good time with Mythos Unbound. Now, the next couple that I read, I'll just do them together because they're in an omnibus. I read books 2 and 3 of the Southern Reach trilogy. There's a 4th book coming out, but I read Authority and Acceptance, both very different to Annihilation, which I read in the month of August, but I loved it. I really love this series so far. And I love that we don't have a lot of answers at the end of it. It just becomes more and more mysterious. Authority, I had a conversation with Ryan over on Genre Blender podcast. I'll have the episode linked down below if you'd like a spoiler-filled chat on the trilogy. Authority was probably the most linear of the three of them, where we're following the Southern Reach, the government body that's in place to look over Area X and running the expeditions. We find a lot more about the expeditions that are being run from that control sort of side of it, and very aptly named Authority, as we're dealing with the people who are in charge of Area X. In Acceptance, this is sort of a jumbled timeline. We're jumping from the lighthouse keeper to the biologist from the first book, and also the director of the Southern Reach, and it puts a lot of puzzle pieces together, but not quite. You sort of get an inkling of how it started, which is really cool, but no real answers are given, and I sort of love that. I love that, the ambiguity of it. I, hands down, not the last Jeff Vandermeer that I will read. The thematics in this whole trilogy are just fantastic. The environmentalism, the systems versus human control, the talks about, does anything really matter, like that sort of nihilistic view on, we work so hard to control all these things, but at the end of the day, what really matters? Like, why does it matter? Why do we put so much stock in these things? The relationships between humans, animals, and the environment, it was just all really cool. I had a fantastic time. This series is going to live in my head rent-free probably for the rest of my life, and I cannot wait for the fourth book, Absolution, to come out. Here we do get more answers than that, but I think we're following expeditions from what I've read so far. But I had a fantastic time with both Authority and Acceptance. The next one I read was Of Love and Loss. This was by B.S.H. Garcia, and it was phenomenal. Book 2, and I thought the first book was ballsy. The first book was such a bold and ambitious debut, and it absolutely nailed it. Book 2, like, B.S.H. Garcia just upped the ante here. So all of our characters are, there's a war. There's a war in the world of Quinaria that is building. And there are all these different parts that are threatening to make this thing sort of blow up. And a whole bunch of different sort of peoples and nations or whatever trying to fight one another. And we see all of that. We see all of our characters split off and deal with different sections of that while dealing with their own shit. And it was just fantastic. I can't say too much. It's a book 2. If you liked book 1, strap yourselves in, because it was phenomenal. Now, the next one I read was a bit of a mood read. So I had a couple of mood reads that crept up on me in the month of September. And the first one is Calypso. This is by Oliver K. Langmead. And this is a sci-fi story told completely in prose. So if we have a look at some of the pages here, so completely told in prose. This is following a woman by the name of Rochelle, who's basically given her life up on Earth to help to create life on Mars. And the opening scene is quite powerful. It's her with her kids acknowledging that she's never going to see them grow up, that she has now given her life and dedicated her life to creating new life and new planets for other people. There was a whole lot of cool conversations in this one about, again, environmentalism. You'll probably hear me talk a lot about it. I really like environmental sci-fi and also environmental horror, because I think it's very relevant and still very unknown in our world. So it really works well. There's a lot of sort of, I guess, talk about faith and concepts of faith in this, and what makes a god, and why, and also human nature, trying to make sure we're helping other populations, and a lot of sort of internal dialogue about that. There is one particular scene in this poem which was just brutal, about how humans will have to bleed, humans will have to sacrifice if we want any chance of healing the world that we're in. I thought it was fantastic, and I had a really good time with it. The next mood read that I picked up was Cubs and Campfires by Dylan Drake. This is a male smut romance, which is definitely not something that I normally gravitate towards, but this really was cozy. It was like 250 pages, super easy to read. It was cozy, it was hot and heavy. I had a good time with it, and I'm looking forward to the second book. And it's not something that I'm actively going to go out and now seek, that particular genre of romance, but I really liked the author's writing, and I really liked the story. I thought it dealt with human connection really well, you know, both in and outside of the bedroom, and I had a cute little fox animal companion. I know what else to tell you. I had a good time. I then finally picked up the Wickwire Watch by Jacqueline Hagan. This is the first in the Riverfall Chronicles by the author. Again, had a really good time with it. I went the audio route for this book, and it was so charming. What sort of shocks me about this one and how much I liked it was the plot. There was sort of one plot thread that we were following with the colonists and people thinking that they're the big bad, whereas a colonist is trying to say that no, we weren't. These specters have created this narrative, and the people have created this narrative, which I think is an interesting conversation in itself, and I may be thinking too much into it on that end. But the way it was written was so charming, so witty, and just drew me in. I couldn't help but really love Inkwell, even though he's like a shithead of a character. But he has had a lot of trust issues. He's dealt with a lot in his family life, and he's sort of learning that he can trust the adults around him. I thought the specters were creepy and atmospheric and cool. I thought that the colonists, sort of the way that they were built up, was done really well. So the intrigue was built up really well and sort of sucked you in. And then that last sort of, I don't know, couple of chapters just went whoo, and now I need to read the second one pretty quickly. So don't be shocked if that one makes its way onto a mood read before the end of the year. But I had a great time with the Wickwire Watch. And the last one I will talk about is another mood read that happened, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is my first Susanna Clarke book. I wanted to read Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell for a while, but this one is much smaller, and I had some audiobook time left, so I picked this one up. Again, very charming, very quirky. It was interesting sort of reading these two together because similar vibes in terms of this atmospheric, sort of quirky prose that almost sounded like a rhyme and a rhythm as you were reading or as you were listening to it. Piranesi, I don't really need to talk about this one. I feel like it did the rounds on BookTube a while ago and people loved it. I'm not singing from the rooftops about it. I didn't love it as much as a lot of other people did. And I would call this speculative fiction, magical realism at a stretch. We're following Piranesi as he navigates a labyrinth which he has been put into. It's sort of mystery, it's sort of just that speculative fiction, that finding that meaning of life, that wanting to help other people. Again, those themes were coming through in this one. And what I will say is I grew up with a little sister who was obsessed with High School Musical, and stay with me, I listened to this on audio, and one of the characters' names is 16. In the first movie of High School Musical, there is a song that says 16 incessantly over and over and over again that I had to have drilled into my brain when my sister watched and rewatched and rewatched and rewatched High School Musical. Every time they talked about character 16, all I could hear in my head was that song. Anyone who's had a sibling or grew up in the High School Musical era, if you know, you know. But I think it took away from part of the reading experience. But definitely not my last Susanna Clarke. Charming, witty, made me think. Had a great time with it. So vivid in its imagery as well, which I absolutely adored. That was my reading month for the month of September. Please don't expect anything like this for the month of October. It's already day 5. I think I've read about 100 pages of anything outside of my own book and an alpha read that I am currently doing. But it seems to be working the way that I'll have like an off month and then I'll have a pretty good month. And I would say 8 books for me is a pretty decent month. What did you read in the month? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like the content, give one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will, and I will catch you in the next video. Ciao.